So, something big has just happened in Europe involving another Russian provocation. But it's not around the Baltics, and it's not in Poland. It's off the coast of Britain, involving what Moscow calls a research vessel, but to many behaves like anything but. Indeed, for the first time, a Russian spy ship has used lasers on Royal Air Force or RAF pilots who were tracking it near UK territorial waters, a move the UK calls deeply dangerous and says it is ready to respond to. A move that also raises questions. Exactly what is a ship known as the Yantar doing off the Scottish coast? Why now? How does it play into everything else we've seen in the past few months? So in this video, I want to break down exactly what's just been going on, why this matters for the uncomfortable truths it's exposing about NATO, and what it means about Russia's bigger strategic attempts, and most importantly, what we can do to respond. Stay tuned for this one. There's a lot more here than you might think.
This is the Global Gambit.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel where we are covering this sudden but serious event, and what for me personally is a tricky one, given that I have direct descendancy and heritage from both the UK and Russia. It goes without saying that both these countries have had a historically antagonistic relationship, apart from certain events such as, say, the Napoleonic Wars or World War II, when a greater foe kind of brought them together. That being said, before getting into it, quick question. Do you think the UK should take tougher actions against these Russian vessels? We've seen previous provocations a lot, which I'll cover in the video, and also how we can respond later on. So drop your comments below, but also keep watching to the end. So, the incident. Over the past 2 weeks, the Russian ship Yantar, officially an oceanic research vessel, has been quietly operating north of Scotland, entering UK waters for the second time this year. RAF Poseidon P-8 planes and a Royal Navy frigate have moved in a few times to shadow it. But then pilots suddenly reported being targeted by lasers for the Yantar. Now, let's be clear. Shining lasers at pilots isn't some harmless annoyance. It's actually illegal in the UK, can disorientate crews, and it's exactly the kind of ambiguous provocation Russia, or specifically the Kremlin, specialises in. Just below the threshold of open confrontation, but clearly some kind of provocation. And as the Defence Secretary John Healey has put it, we see you. We know what you're doing, and if the Yantar travels south this week, we are ready. He has also changed naval rules of engagement, allowing the Royal Navy to follow the ship more closely while it remains in wider UK waters, what most people would see as the Economic Exclusive Zone, or EEZ. So this is not routine, this is the UK signalling very strongly in response to Moscow. Now, Russia says that the Yantar is a harmless scientific vessel conducting scientific research around the Arctic sphere and such. Now, Western governments, including the UK, believe it's a platform for deep-sea surveillance and potential sabotage, run by Russia's main Directorate for Deep Sea Research, or GUGI. This directorate reports directly to the MOD. It's science, therefore, not really about that, but more about mapping undersea cables, monitoring pipelines, gathering strategic intelligence, preparing the battle space, you could argue, therefore, for potential disruptions. Over 90% of the world's digital communication, including billions in financial transactions every day between obviously New York, London, North America, Western Europe, travel through these undersea cables. Britain alone sits at the centre of dozens of these links. And in the words of some other people, using lasers to impede RAF pilots is escalation for sure. Even if they don't necessarily blind anyone, it's a message. Let us operate, or we'll make you think twice about monitoring us. And this is part of a bigger pattern. You see, the UK sits at a strategical choke point known as the GUIK, or the relationship between Iceland, Greenland, and the UK. To understand why the Yantar alarms are so many being a big deal, we have to place it in the longer timeline of Russian provocations in European, or particularly Britain's waters. For more than a decade, Moscow has repeatedly used its navy, submarines, and so-called research vessels to test the boundaries of this European security. Notable episodes include between 2014 and 2017. Russian submarines suspected of operating near Sweden's coast prompted one of Europe's largest anti-submarine hunts since the Cold War. Just in 2015, NATO reported a surge in Russian submarine activity in the North Atlantic. Levels not seen since the height of the Soviet era, the late 70s, 80s. And then, specifically in 2017, a series of mysterious undersea cable disruptions between Norway and Svalbard, widely suspected, though never openly confirmed, to be linked to Russian operations. Then, more recently in 2021, a Russian vessel was detected manoeuvring over Ireland's main transatlantic cables, prompting emergency meetings in Dublin over infrastructure security. Of course, the most notable recent ones are the Nord Stream pipeline explosions, whose culprit remains officially unknown, but many blame Russia, although there is a fair amount of evidence to suggest it was self-sabotage by the Ukrainians, or even an independent party. The point is that this pattern matters because each act follows the same logic. Ambiguous pressure, always at arm's length, always plausibly deniable. The Yantar is simply the most visible and technologically advanced expression of that strategy. It obviously also heightens debate in the UK specifically. If a foreign military vessel does the same in British waters to British pilot, critics say the response should be far stronger than simply diplomatic warnings. Among the more forceful voices, arguments say that if the UK has evidence, it should board the ship and impound it under international maritime law. The Russian ambassador should be summoned and required to explain the incident. Allowing Moscow to repeatedly test UK defences risks making Britain look weak, and in many people's eyes, Britain is looking the weakest that it has in the, post-imperialistic era, a laughingstock, in some people's words. These arguments are shaped by the wider fear that Moscow-backed agents and operatives are becoming more aggressive across Europe. There is no ability to deny that Moscow is far more active in its disruptive or nefarious activities, be it in political messaging or electoral interference in Moldova and other areas that I've covered on the channel multiple times. The recent sabotage activity uncovered in Poland on the railway tracks is cited as yet another example of Russia's growing hybrid pressure campaign, and why some people do believe that we are basically at war with Russia. Now, some people also argue, and this is something that I think would be worth considering, Britain should follow the example of Turkey, something that I emphasised in a previous video, that once it shot down a Russian jet that violated its airspace, Russia stopped its incursions almost immediately. Along those lines, some say impound the Yantar, sink it. Putin can bluster all he wants, but he cannot afford an actual military confrontation, given, well, yes, he's gradually taking Pokrovsk, but at what cost? And how well can he manage multiple fronts if he can't even manage his primary one in Ukraine? Britain's response to Russia's grey zone aggression has often been described as cautious or reactive, and it therefore helps if the country shifts from reactive to proactive, directly calling out and making it very clear that Russia can't, or Putin can't, get away with things like assassinations, poisonings, sabotage, hacking and cyber operations, all that we've seen just in Britain alone in the past 10 years. Now, Britain particularly is an island tied to the world by two things: air corridors and undersea cables. Those cables, as I said, are incredibly important for bringing energy from, say, Norway. The obvious concern here is that the Yantar is sitting above a critical piece of infrastructure, nosing around cables that transfer up to 7 trillion of financial transactions every day. A hostile actor, be that a nation state or a non-nation state, if they decide to disable even a handful of these cables, could cause economic paralysis, communication outages, and military disruption. Something that would be particularly bad for NATO, given the more senior position that the UK holds, and as one of the more nuclear-capable powers within the alliance. As I've said before, Russia's incursions, these provocations, are part of a broader European strategy, an emboldened effort by Moscow to really push the boundaries and see whether NATO will actually respond or just hold more talks. For Russia, every Western reaction is valuable data. How quickly can NATO respond? What assets it deploys and how far is it willing to push? All of these occurring while Moscow continues its war on the Eastern Front, but also in other theatres. Look at what's happening in Africa, and I'll be covering that in a deeper dive video, so be sure to subscribe if you like that. And as I say, like the video, it's really easy to do, it's free, but it helps out a lot. And as we approach 100,000 subscribers, which I'd love to achieve before the end of the year, I'd love to hear more about what you'd like to see, and also what you enjoy or what you think about these topics. So the legal and military angle, specifically the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, foreign ships may pass through UK waters so long as their passage is innocent. Shocking, that. But using lasers on RF pilots is not really innocent. Concealing your location is not really innocent. And operating near critical infrastructure in ambiguous ways, opaque ways, is certainly not innocent. There are various military options that could be utilised if the Yantar changes its course. There haven't been specificities about this deliberately. Strategic ambiguity is part of deterrence, but the point is that the UK should be stepping up more bluntly. They also lead as one of the senior members of NATO and one of the ones that has been more proactive in helping Ukraine in its defence. The Royal Navy even surfaced a submarine directly in front of the Yantar, an extremely rare warning gesture. Just an example. These shows of force, you may think, well, it's nothing more than posturing. Well, that's what Russia's doing most of the time. Now, the bigger picture here is how serious really is this? The Yantar alone can't sever Britain from the world, but its mission is about preparation, know exactly where the critical cable lines and how easy to access them. It opens the floodgates, quote unquote, to allow submarines or other covert vessels to come through. If Russia ever sought to escalate with overt attacks, sabotaging deep-sea cables would be one of its most effective tools. This laser incident matters because it shows Russia is willing to push the boundaries while watching how Britain responds. And that has direct implications for NATO, European security, and the UK's ability to be seen as one of the providers of broader continental defence, especially when it's, say, establishing deepening ties with Poland or the Baltics as a way to dissuade Putin from continuing these provocations. It is early days, but the point is a response must be made. In my blunt opinion, simply making more statements is completely feckless at this point, and if anything, really frustrating. We need to do more in a proactive sense. Maybe sinking the vessel is a bit much, but certainly impounding it, directly taking the people and interrogating them, but making it very clear to the Russian government that if they're going to be illegally trespassing over British waters, which they are, it's not international, the Kremlin does not have a countenance for that. It is a illegal trans of British waters, much like China claims about what Britain and America are doing with Chinese waters, and Russia comes to the Chinese perspective and support of that. Right now, the Yantar's exact location is unknown. It hasn't broadcast its position since early November. But these RAF patrols continue off and around Scotland, and the UK has hardened its stance. Given the number of NATO bases or strategic importance of the Trident nuclear system in Scotland, this is unfolding as Britain negotiates with the EU over a new $150 billion defence initiative, seeking to modernise its and the continent's capabilities. All of this points to the simple truth, therefore. Europe is entering a more dangerous era than ever, and Russia is really pushing the boundaries of what it thinks it can get away with, all because of one man's obsession over a former imperialist ideal that does not exist or shouldn't in the modern system. Now, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. My name's Pyotr Kurzin. I am half English, half Russian, and I try to cover these issues as internationally and broadly as possible, whilst also covering things that are forgotten about, including engaging diplomats, analysts, economists, and such. If you enjoyed this, then do subscribe, like the video, it's free, and if you want to go further, then consider buying me a coffee or a couple of beers, I really appreciate it, or become a member of the channel and watch on my Patreon, where I'm releasing more and more content exclusively for you guys. But thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.